She was standing at the altar when the doors slammed open and her groom ran. Not walked, ran, in front of 300 people. The silk of her wedding gown suddenly felt like a noose, the flowers in her hands like a funeral bouquet. Eliza Harrow had prepared for everything except this, public annihilation. But what happened next? That changed everything. A stranger stepped forward, a duke with secrets darker than her shame. And what he did in that chapel didn't save her. It wrecked her life and rebuilt it from the ground up. Stick with me until the end of this story. You won't believe where it goes. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far Eliza's story travels. And if you want to see how a woman turns her worst moment into her greatest weapon, hit that like button and let's go. The morning had started wrong. Eliza noticed it the moment her maid, Catherine, came into the room with tea that was too hot and hands that shook. Catherine never shook. She was 62 years old and had dressed 3 generations of Harrow women without so much as a tremor. But today, the porcelain rattled against the saucer, and when Eliza looked up, Catherine wouldn't meet her eyes. "What is it?" Eliza asked. "Nothing, miss. Just the nerves of the day." Eliza didn't believe her, but she also didn't push. It was her wedding day, after all. Everyone was allowed to be a little off-center. She sat still while Catherine pinned her hair, coiled it into something elegant and suffocating. The mirror showed a version of herself she barely recognized, powdered, painted, wrapped in ivory silk that cost more than most families earned in a year. Her mother had chosen the gown. Her father had chosen the groom. Eliza had chosen nothing, really, except to go along with it all because that's what women like her did. You didn't make waves. You made marriages. Thomas Wycliffe was handsome enough, polite enough, boring enough to be safe, which her mother had assured her was a virtue. "Excitement fades, Eliza," she'd said over breakfast 3 months ago when the engagement had been announced. "Stability endures." Eliza wasn't sure she believed that either, but she also wasn't sure it mattered. By noon, she was in the carriage with her father, William Harrow, whose jowls had gone red with either pride or the tightness of his collar. He wasn't a man given to sentiment, but he patted her hand twice as they rolled toward St. Clement's Chapel, and that was as close to affection as he ever got. "You've done well," he said. Eliza nodded. She wasn't sure what she'd done exactly, except exist in the right family at the right time with the right dowry. The chapel loomed ahead, all stone and stained glass and the weight of centuries. Eliza's stomach twisted. She told herself it was normal. Every bride felt this way. The nerves would pass once the vows were spoken, once the thing was done, and she could stop holding her breath. But when the carriage door opened and she stepped out into the gray London afternoon, the air smelled like rain and something else. Something sour. She couldn't name it, but it clung to her as she walked up the steps, her father's arm locked around hers like a shackle. Inside, the chapel was packed. 300 people, maybe more. Every pew filled with faces she half recognized, distant cousins, business associates of her father's, society matrons who smiled with their mouths and judged with their eyes. The flowers were extravagant, white roses and lilies choking the air with perfume. The organ played something slow and sacred. Everything was perfect. Except Thomas wasn't at the altar. Eliza's heart kicked once, hard. She scanned the front of the chapel. The vicar stood there, hands folded, expression unreadable. But the space where Thomas should have been, where he was supposed to be, was empty. Her father's grip tightened. "He's probably just—" The side door crashed open. Thomas Wycliffe stumbled through it, wild-eyed, his cravat undone, his coat half-buttoned. He looked like he'd been running, or fighting, or both. "Thomas?" Eliza's voice came out smaller than she wanted. He didn't answer. He stared at her, and for a second, just a second, she saw something she'd never seen in him before. Panic. Raw, unfiltered panic. Then he turned and ran. Not toward her. Away. Straight down the center aisle, past the gasping guests, past her mother who stood with one hand pressed to her mouth, past the vicar who looked like he might faint. Thomas shoved open the chapel doors and disappeared into the street, and the sound of those doors slamming shut echoed like a gunshot. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Eliza stood frozen. Her brain couldn't process it. Her groom had just fled. In front of everyone. In front of everyone. Then the whispers started, soft at first like the hiss of a kettle, then louder, sharper, cruel. Did he just ran away? What did she do? Must be something wrong with her. Eliza's face burned. She felt every eye in the room drilling into her, dissecting her, deciding what she was worth now that she'd been publicly discarded. Her hands were still clutching the bouquet, but her fingers had gone numb. Her father swore under his breath. I'll kill him. Her mother appeared at her side, pale as the roses. Eliza, we need to leave. Now! But Eliza couldn't move. She was rooted to the spot, the weight of humiliation pressing down on her like a collapsed roof. This wasn't supposed to happen. Women like her didn't get abandoned at the altar. Women like her did everything right. Smiled when they were supposed to, stayed quiet when they were supposed to, married who they were told to marry. And in return, they got security. They got a life that made sense. But Thomas had just ripped that deal apart in front of 300 witnesses. Miss Harrow, the voice cut through the chaos, low and precise. Eliza looked up. A man stood in the center aisle, tall, dark-haired, expensively dressed in a way that made everyone else in the room look like they were trying too hard. She didn't recognize him, but the way people shifted, the way they moved out of his path, told her he was someone who mattered. He walked toward her with the kind of calm that only came from absolute certainty. No hesitation, no doubt, just purpose. Who the hell are you? Her father demanded. The man didn't look at him. He looked at Eliza, and his eyes were gray, cold, unreadable. Adrian Blackwood, he said, Duke of Ashford, and I believe I owe you an explanation. Eliza's breath caught. A duke, here, talking to her, in the middle of her ruined wedding. What are you talking about? Her mother snapped. Adrian finally glanced at her just long enough to make her flinch. Then he looked back at Eliza. Your groom didn't leave because of you, he said. He left because I made him. The whispers exploded. Eliza stared at him. You what? Thomas Wycliffe is drowning in debt, Adrian said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Gambling debts, bad investments. He was going to use your dowry to pay off his creditors and leave you with nothing. I found out 2 days ago. I gave him a choice. Disappear now or be publicly exposed and ruined. He chose the former. Eliza felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. That's not... It's true. Adrian's gaze didn't waver. And I have the ledgers to prove it. Her father stepped forward, face purple. You had no right. I had every right. Adrian's voice went cold. Wycliffe was going to commit fraud. If you want to press the matter, we can take it to court, but I suspect you'd rather avoid the scandal. The silence was different now, heavier. People weren't just staring at Eliza anymore. They were staring at Adrian, trying to figure out what this meant, what kind of power play they were witnessing. Eliza's mother grabbed her arm. We're leaving. No. The word came out of Eliza's mouth before she knew she was going to say it. Her mother froze. No, she repeated, incredulous. Eliza pulled her arm free. She looked at Adrian Blackwood, this stranger who had just blown her life apart, and something inside her snapped. Not broke. Snapped. Like a tether cut loose. Why did you do this? She asked. Adrian tilted his head, studying her. Because no one else would. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Her father moved between them. You've done enough damage. My daughter, your daughter, Adrian interrupted, was about to be used and discarded. I stopped it. You're welcome. We didn't ask for your help. No, Adrian agreed. You asked for a wedding. I gave you the truth instead. Eliza's hands were shaking. She didn't know if it was rage or shock or something worse. You humiliated me. Thomas humiliated you. I just made sure you knew why. And now what? She demanded. Everyone here thinks I'm defective, that there's something wrong with me. That's why he ran. Then they're idiots. That doesn't help me. Adrian's expression didn't change. No, it doesn't. Eliza wanted to scream or cry or hit him, but the chapel was still full of people, still watching, and if she fell apart now, she'd never get back up. Her mother tried again. Eliza, please. I need air, Eliza said. She turned and walked. Not ran. She refused to run. She walked down the aisle, past the staring faces, past the vicar who looked like he wanted to say something but didn't, past the flowers that suddenly smelled like rot. She pushed open the chapel doors and stepped out into the cold. The street was empty. Thomas was long gone. The sky was gray, heavy with rain that hadn't fallen yet. Eliza stood there, alone, and finally let herself shake. She'd done everything right, everything, and it hadn't mattered. She'd still been humiliated, still been left standing in a wedding dress with nowhere to go. Behind her, she heard footsteps. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Adrian said. Eliza didn't turn around. "I'm not a child." "I didn't say you were." "Then why are you following me?" "Because this isn't over." She spun around. "What do you mean?" Adrian's face was unreadable. "Thomas didn't just run. He's going to try to salvage this. He'll claim I sabotaged him. He'll say I lied. And he'll come after you to get his credibility back." Eliza's stomach dropped. "Why would he?" "Because men like him always do. They can't admit their failures, so they blame someone else. And you're the easiest target." "So what am I supposed to do?" Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "You fight back." "I don't know how." "Then I'll teach you." Eliza stared at him. "Why would you do that?" Adrian's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Because I don't like bullies, and because you're angrier than you're letting yourself admit. That's useful." Before Eliza could respond, her father burst out of the chapel, followed by her mother and half the congregation. "Eliza!" her mother called. But Eliza wasn't looking at her. She was looking at Adrian Blackwood, this stranger who had destroyed her wedding and somehow made her feel less like a victim and more like someone who'd just been handed a weapon. "What do I have to do?" she asked quietly. Adrian's eyes glinted. "First, stop apologizing for things that aren't your fault. Second, let me handle Thomas. And third, what? Decide if you're going to let them tell your story or if you're going to tell it yourself." Eliza's heart hammered. She didn't know this man, didn't trust him, but she also didn't have a lot of options. "If I do this," she said, "I want the truth. All of it." Adrian nodded. "Deal." Her father arrived, red-faced and furious. "Stay away from my daughter." Adrian didn't even look at him. He kept his eyes on Eliza. "Your choice." Eliza glanced at her father, her mother, the crowd of people spilling out of the chapel, all of them watching, waiting to see what she'd do, waiting to see if she'd crumble. She turned back to Adrian. "Let's go," she said. Her mother gasped. Her father started shouting, but Eliza was already walking, and Adrian was beside her, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't following someone else's plan. She was making her own. The carriage Adrian provided was black, unmarked, and far nicer than anything Eliza had ever ridden in. The interior smelled like leather, and something else. Tobacco, maybe, or old wood. She sat stiffly on the velvet seat, her wedding dress pooling around her like a melted candle. Adrian sat across from her, silent, watching the city roll past the window. "Where are we going?" Eliza finally asked. "My house?" "That's not appropriate." "Neither is being abandoned at your wedding, but here we are." Eliza's jaw tightened. "You're not funny." "I'm not trying to be." They lapsed back into silence. Eliza's mind was racing. She kept replaying the moment Thomas had run, kept seeing the faces of everyone in that chapel, kept hearing the whispers. What did she do? Must be something wrong with her. "Stop," Adrian said. Eliza blinked. "What?" "Stop replaying it. It doesn't help." "How do you know what I'm—" "Because I can see it on your face." Eliza looked away, cheeks burning. "I don't need your pity." "Good. I don't have any." She glared at him. "Then what do you want?" Adrian leaned back, studying her. "I told you. I don't like bullies. Thomas Wycliffe is a coward and a fraud, and he was going to ruin you. I stopped it. By ruining me in a different way. You're not ruined. Everyone thinks I am." "Then change what they think." Eliza laughed, bitter. "How? By telling them the truth? They'll just say I'm lying to save face. Not if you have proof." She frowned. "You said you have ledgers." "I do. Wycliffe's debts, his creditors, his plan to use your dowry to pay them off and then disappear. It's all documented. How did you even find this? Adrian's expression went flat. I make it my business to know things. That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting. Eliza wanted to push, but something in his tone told her she'd hit a wall. Fine. She'd get answers later. The carriage stopped in front of a massive townhouse in Mayfair. Eliza had passed it before. Everyone had. It was one of those houses that made you feel small just looking at it. Adrian stepped out first, then offered his hand. Eliza hesitated, then took it. His grip was firm, steady, not gentle, not rough. Just sure. Inside, the house was as imposing as the exterior. Dark wood, high ceilings, portraits of stern-looking ancestors glaring down from the walls. A butler appeared, ancient and silent, and Adrian handed him his coat without a word. This way, Adrian said to Eliza. He led her to a study lined with books and smelling of ink and old paper. A fire crackled in the hearth. On the desk, a stack of ledgers sat waiting. Adrian gestured to them. There's your proof. Eliza approached slowly, like the ledgers might bite. She opened the top one and scanned the entries. Numbers, names, dates, all in Thomas's handwriting. Her stomach turned. He owes thousands. More than that. He's been borrowing from anyone who'd lend. And when your dowry came into the picture, he saw a way out. Eliza closed the ledger, hands shaking. I almost married him. Yes. I almost gave him everything. Yes. She looked up at Adrian. Why didn't you just tell me? Why did you have to do it like that, in front of everyone? Adrian's jaw tightened. Because if I'd told you privately, you wouldn't have believed me. You would have thought I was lying or had some ulterior motive. And Thomas would have convinced you I was the villain. This way, he showed his hand. He ran. He proved my point. Eliza wanted to argue, but she couldn't. He was right. If Adrian had approached her quietly, she would have dismissed him. She would have told Thomas, and Thomas would have spun some story, and she would have walked into that marriage blind. He's going to fight back, she said quietly. Yes. How? Adrian sat on the edge of the desk, arms crossed. He'll claim I coerced him, that I threatened him. He'll try to paint himself as the victim, and you as the woman who drove him away. That's insane. It's effective. Eliza paced, the ridiculous wedding dress dragging behind her. So what do I do? You get ahead of it. You control the narrative. How? Adrian's eyes gleamed. You tell the truth, publicly, before he can. Eliza stopped. You mean, go to the papers? No, I mean, go to society, the people who were in that chapel, the people who are already talking. You invite them to your home, you show them the ledgers, and you tell them exactly what Thomas tried to do. Eliza's heart pounded. That's social suicide. Or it's the only way you survive. She stared at him. You're serious. Completely. They'll tear me apart. Maybe, or they'll respect you for standing up. Either way, you'll have told your side. And that's more than most people get. Eliza sank into a chair, the weight of it all crashing down. I don't know if I can do this. Adrian crouched in front of her, meeting her eyes. Yes, you can. You don't know me. I know you didn't cry in that chapel. I know you didn't run. I know you're sitting here, in a stranger's house, planning your next move instead of hiding. That tells me everything I need to know. Eliza's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to think she was strong enough for this. But she was terrified. What if I fail? She whispered. Adrian's expression softened, just a fraction. Then you fail. But at least you'll have tried. The next 3 days were a blur. Eliza moved into Adrian's guest wing. Her parents had been furious, but Adrian had made it clear she wasn't safe at home. Not until Thomas's next move became clear. Her mother had wept. Her father had threatened legal action. But in the end, they'd let her go. Because what else could they do? She was already ruined. Adrian put her to work immediately. They went through the ledgers together, line by line, building a case. He taught her how to read the entries, how to trace the debts, how to see the pattern of Thomas's desperation. He started small, Adrian explained, pointing to an entry from 2 years ago. £100 here, 200 there. But then he got in deeper. Bigger loans, higher interest. And when he couldn't pay, he borrowed more to cover the original debts. Eliza frowned. That's madness. That's addiction. Gambling, in his case. He couldn't stop. And my dowry was supposed to fix it. Temporarily. But it wouldn't have lasted. He would have burned through it in 6 months and been right back where he started. Eliza felt sick. She'd been so close to that life, so close to being trapped with a man who would have bled her dry and left her with nothing. "Thank you," she said quietly. Adrian looked up. "For what?" "For stopping it." He nodded, then went back to the ledgers. "Don't thank me yet. We're not done." On the third day, a letter arrived. Eliza recognized the handwriting immediately. Thomas. Her hand shook as she opened it. "Eliza, I know you must be confused and hurt. I want you to know that I never intended for things to end this way. The Duke of Ashford has spread lies about me, and I fear you've been caught in the middle. I am willing to meet with you to explain everything, if you'll allow it. Please. I still care for you. Yours." Thomas. Eliza read it twice, then handed it to Adrian without a word. He scanned it, then tossed it into the fire. "He's testing you," Adrian said, "seeing if you'll break." "What do I do?" "Nothing. Let him sweat." But 2 days later, another letter came. Then another. Each one more desperate, more pleading. "Please, Eliza, let me explain. I made mistakes, but I can fix this. We can still have a future." Eliza wanted to scream. "He's not going to stop," she said. Adrian looked up from his desk. "No, he's not." "Then what?" "Then we move first." The plan was insane. Adrian wanted Eliza to host a gathering, a ball, and invite everyone who'd been at the wedding, everyone who'd seen her humiliated, and in the middle of it, she'd tell them the truth. "You're out of your mind," Eliza said. "Probably. They'll destroy me. Or they'll listen." "Why would they listen?" Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Because you're not going to beg. You're not going to apologize. You're going to walk in there, look them in the eye, and tell them exactly what happened. And then you're going to dare them to call you a liar." Eliza's pulse raced. "What if they do?" "Then I'll back you up. I'll show them the ledgers. I'll name every creditor Thomas owes. And I'll make it very clear that anyone who sides with him is siding with a fraud." Eliza stared at him. "You'd do that?" "Yes." "Why?" Adrian's gaze hardened. "Because I told you, I don't like bullies." Eliza wanted to believe it was that simple, but she could see something else in his eyes. Something darker. Something personal. "There's more to this," she said. "Isn't there?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Are you going to tell me?" "No." "Why not?" "Because it doesn't matter." Eliza's frustration flared. "It matters to me." Adrian stood, crossing to the window. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "Thomas Wycliffe isn't the first man I've stopped, and he won't be the last." Eliza frowned. "What does that mean?" Adrian turned to face her. "It means I've spent the last 5 years making sure men like him don't get away with it. Frauds, abusers, cowards who hide behind money and titles and think they're untouchable." His voice went cold. "I make them touchable." Eliza's breath caught. "Why?" Adrian's eyes were distant. "Because no one stopped the man who destroyed my sister." The room went silent. Eliza's heart twisted. "Adrian, don't." His voice was sharp. "Don't pity me. I don't want it. I'm not good." He turned back to the window. "The ball is in 3 days. I'll send the invitations. You just need to show up and tell the truth." Eliza wanted to push, wanted to ask more, but she could see the wall had gone back up. Whatever pain Adrian carried, he wasn't ready to share it, so she nodded. "Okay." Adrian glanced at her. "You're sure?" Eliza thought about Thomas's letters, about the whispers in the chapel, about the life she'd almost had, and she thought about the woman she wanted to be, not the one who hid, the one who fought. "I'm sure," she said. Adrian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Good." The invitations went out the next morning, cream-colored cards with black lettering, delivered by Adrian's footmen to every household that had witnessed Eliza's humiliation. The wording was simple, almost brutal in its directness. Miss Eliza Harrow requests the honor of your presence at Ashford House for an evening of truth and clarification regarding recent events. Thursday, 8 o'clock. No flourish, no apology, just a summons. Eliza watched from the study window as the last footman departed, her stomach in knots. They won't come. Adrian didn't look up from the papers he was reviewing. They'll come. Why would they? I'm a scandal now. Nobody wants to be associated with... They'll come because they're curious, because they want to see if you'll fall apart, and because refusing an invitation from a duke is social suicide. He glanced at her. Trust me, that ballroom will be packed. Eliza wrapped her arms around herself. The wedding dress was long gone, replaced by one of Adrian's sister's old gowns that Catherine had altered to fit. It was dark green, simpler than anything Eliza usually wore, and she felt strangely exposed in it. What was her name? Eliza asked quietly. Adrian's pen stopped moving. Who? Your sister. The silence stretched so long Eliza thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Charlotte. What happened to her? Adrian set down the pen, his jaw tight. She fell in love with the wrong man. He promised her everything, took what he wanted, and then destroyed her reputation when she refused to keep quiet about his debts. She couldn't recover from it. The shame... He stopped, his hands curling into fists on the desk. She died 2 years ago. Eliza's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just make sure Thomas Wycliffe doesn't get away with doing the same thing to you. Before Eliza could respond, the butler appeared in the doorway. Your Grace, you have a visitor. Adrian frowned. I am not receiving anyone today. He was quite insistent, sir. A Mr. Thomas Wycliffe. Eliza's blood went cold. Adrian's expression turned to stone. Show him in, Adrian said quietly. Adrian, no, Eliza started. It's fine. Let's hear what he has to say. The butler withdrew. Eliza's heart hammered. She wasn't ready for this. She'd thought she'd have more time to prepare, to steel herself. Thomas walked in looking worse than she'd ever seen him. His clothes were rumpled, his face unshaven, his eyes bloodshot. He stopped when he saw Eliza, and something like relief crossed his features. Eliza, thank heaven, I've been trying to reach you. Get out, Adrian said. Thomas ignored him, moving toward Eliza. Please, just listen. I know how this looks, but you have to understand. I said get out. Adrian stood, and there was something in his posture that made Thomas freeze. This is between me and my fiancé, Thomas said, his voice shaking slightly. She's not your fiancé. She was never your fiancé. You were using her. Thomas's face flushed. That's a lie. I love her. Eliza found her voice. No, you don't. Thomas turned to her, desperate. Eliza, please. I made mistakes. I was in debt, yes, but I was going to fix it. I was going to make everything right. With my money, Eliza said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. You were going to take my dowry and disappear. No, I would never. I've seen the ledgers, Thomas. I know about the debts. I know about the plan. Thomas's expression crumbled. For a moment he looked genuinely anguished, then his face hardened. He's poisoned you against me. Can't you see that? Ashford has his own agenda. He's using you. The only person who used me was you, Eliza said, and the words felt like glass in her throat. You proposed knowing you were bankrupt. You stood in that chapel knowing you were lying, and when you got caught, you ran. I panicked. I was scared. You should be, Adrian cut in, because in 2 days, everyone you know is going to find out exactly what kind of man you are. Thomas's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Thursday night, here. I'm hosting a gathering, and Eliza is going to tell everyone the truth about your debts, your schemes, and your cowardice. Thomas looked between them, his face going pale. You can't do that. Watch us, Adrian said. I'll sue you, both of you. I'll claim defamation, slander. With what money? Adrian's voice was ice. You're broke. And even if you weren't, everything we're going to say is documented. Your creditors will testify. Your ledgers speak for themselves. You have no case." Thomas's hands trembled. Then, suddenly, his expression shifted. The desperation vanished, replaced by something uglier. "Fine. You want to play it that way? Then I'll tell them the truth about you, Eliza." Eliza's stomach dropped. "What?" Thomas's smile was vicious. "I'll tell them you were the one who pushed me away. That you were cold, unresponsive, that you made it clear you didn't want this marriage. I'll say you were having an affair, with Ashford maybe. That you used me to get close to a duke." Adrian moved so fast Eliza barely saw it. One moment he was behind the desk, the next he had Thomas by the collar, slamming him against the wall. "Say one more word," Adrian said quietly, "and I will destroy you so thoroughly you'll wish I'd just killed you instead." Thomas's bravado cracked. "You're insane." "No, I'm methodical. I know every debt you owe, every creditor who's looking for you, every lie you've told. And if you try to drag Eliza through the mud, I will make sure all of it becomes public knowledge. Not just in London, everywhere. You'll never be able to show your face in society again." He released Thomas, who stumbled back, gasping. "Get out of my house," Adrian said. Thomas straightened his coat, trying to regain some dignity. He looked at Eliza one last time. "You're making a mistake. He's not your savior. He's just using you for his own revenge." Then he turned and left. Eliza exhaled shakily. Her hands were trembling. "He's going to come to the ball. Yes. He's going to try to tear me apart in front of everyone. Yes." She looked at Adrian. "What if he wins?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "Then we make sure he doesn't." But the next day, Eliza's mother arrived unannounced. Catherine showed her into the drawing room where Eliza was practicing her speech, the words she'd say to the crowd on Thursday. She'd written and rewritten them a dozen times, and they still didn't feel right. Her mother looked smaller than Eliza remembered. Older. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. "Mama," Eliza said, standing. Her mother crossed the room and slapped her. The crack echoed in the silent room. Eliza's cheeks stung, her eyes watering from shock more than pain. "How could you?" her mother hissed. "How could you do this to us?" Eliza touched her face, her voice shaking. "Do what? Be humiliated? Be lied to?" "You're living in a duke's house, unchaperoned, planning some spectacle that will ruin what's left of our family's name. Thomas already did that when he ran. Thomas made a mistake. He was young, foolish. He was a fraud." Eliza's voice rose. "He was going to steal my dowry and leave me with nothing. Adrian proved it." "Adrian," her mother spat. "You call him by his Christian name now? Do you have any idea what people are saying about you?" "I don't care what they're saying." "Well, you should. Your father's business associates are pulling their investments. Your cousins won't speak to us. We're being cut from every social event. Because of Thomas, not me." Her mother's face twisted. "Because of you. Because instead of quietly disappearing, instead of letting this blow over, you're making it worse. You're choosing scandal." Eliza's throat tightened. "I'm choosing the truth." "The truth doesn't matter, Eliza. Perception matters. Reputation matters. And yours is already destroyed. But if you go through with this insane plan, if you stand in front of society and air your grievances like some common— Like what, Mama? Say it." Her mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're being selfish." The words hit harder than the slap. Eliza swallowed. "I'm being selfish? I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to be used. I didn't ask to be abandoned. I did everything you wanted. I accepted Thomas. I planned the wedding. I smiled and nodded and played the perfect bride. And it almost destroyed me. So instead you'll destroy us? I'm trying to survive." "By dragging us down with you?" her mother's voice cracked. "Your father is ruined, Eliza, socially, financially, everything. And for what? So you can have your moment of defiance?" Eliza felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm sorry it's hard for you, but I can't live the rest of my life being ashamed of something I didn't do." Her mother stared at her for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, "Then you're on your own." She turned and walked out. Eliza stood frozen, her cheeks still throbbing, her heart breaking. She'd known her parents would be angry, but she hadn't expected this. hadn't expected to be cut off completely. Adrian appeared in the doorway. He must have heard everything. "Are you all right?" he asked. Eliza wiped her eyes quickly. "Fine." "Liar." She laughed, bitter. "What do you want me to say? That it hurts? That I feel like I'm losing everything?" Her voice broke. "I know what I have to do, but that doesn't make it easier." Adrian crossed the room and, to her surprise, put a hand on her shoulder. "It's not supposed to be easy." Eliza looked up at him. Did your parents turn on her too?" Adrian's hand dropped. "They died before it happened. Carriage accident. So she only had me." His voice went rough. "And I failed her." "You didn't—" "I did. I was too late. I didn't see the signs, didn't stop the man who destroyed her, didn't protect her when she needed me most. So now I make sure no one else has to go through that alone." Eliza's chest ached. She reached out tentatively and took his hand. "You're not failing me." Adrian looked down at their joined hands, something unreadable crossing his face. Then he pulled away. "Thursday," he said. "We end this Thursday." The day of the ball arrived too fast. Eliza woke with her stomach in knots. Catherine dressed her in a gown Adrian had commissioned, deep burgundy silk that made her look older, stronger, less like the trembling bride from the chapel. Her hair was pinned up simply, no elaborate curls, no attempt to soften her appearance. "You look like a woman going into battle," Catherine said. Eliza met her own eyes in the mirror. "Good." Downstairs, Adrian was already dressed, crisp and imposing, in black. He'd arranged the ballroom with military precision, chairs in a semicircle facing a small raised platform where Eliza would speak. The ledgers were displayed on a table to the side, ready to be examined. "Last chance to back out," Adrian said. Eliza shook her head. "I'm not backing out." "Even if your parents disown you? Even if half of society calls you a liar?" "Even then." Adrian's mouth twitched. "All right. Then let's give them a show." The guests began arriving at 8. Eliza watched from an upstairs window as carriage after carriage pulled up, disgorging elaborately dressed men and women who whispered to each other as they entered. She recognized most of them. Distant relatives, family friends, people who'd smiled at her before the wedding and probably sneered at her after. By 8:30, the ballroom was full. Over 200 people, all waiting to see what would happen. Eliza's hands were shaking. She gripped them together, forcing herself to breathe. "It's time," Adrian said from the doorway. Eliza turned. "What if I freeze? What if I can't get the words out?" "Then I'll speak for you, but you won't freeze." He held out his arm. "You're stronger than you think." Eliza took his arm, and they descended the stairs together. The ballroom fell silent as they entered. Every eye turned to them. Eliza felt the weight of their stares, their judgment, their curiosity. But she kept her chin up, kept walking. Adrian led her to the platform, then stepped aside. Eliza faced the crowd. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Then she saw Thomas. He was standing in the back, arms crossed, a smug smile on his face. He thought she'd crumble, thought she'd run. Eliza's fear turned to anger. She cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "I know there's been a lot of talk about what happened at my wedding, a lot of speculation, rumors, assumptions, so I wanted to set the record straight." She paused. "The truth is, Thomas Wycliffe didn't leave me at the altar because of anything I did. He left because he was exposed." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Thomas stepped forward. "That's a lie." "It's not," Eliza said, her voice cutting through his. "Thomas Wycliffe is drowning in gambling debts. Over £15,000 owed to various creditors across London. He planned to use my dowry to pay them off and disappear, leaving me with nothing." The whispers exploded. Thomas's face went red. "I have proof," Eliza continued. She gestured to the table. "Those ledgers contain every debt, every loan, every desperate scheme Thomas engaged in over the past 2 years. They're available for anyone who wants to examine them." Several people moved toward the table. Thomas tried to push through the crowd. "This is slander. She's lying." "Then prove it," Adrian said coldly, stepping forward. "Show them your financial records. Show them you're solvent, or admit that everything she's saying is true." Thomas's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Eliza turned back to the crowd. I'm not here to ask for your pity. I'm here to tell you what happened so you can judge for yourselves. Thomas Wycliffe is a liar and a fraud, and I refuse to be silent about it. A woman in the front row, Lady Pemberton, one of her mother's oldest friends, stood up. Why should we believe you? You're living with the Duke of Ashford, unchaperoned. For all we know, this is some scheme the two of you cooked up. For what purpose? Eliza shot back. What do I gain from this? I've lost my reputation, my family, my future. All I have left is the truth. Or revenge, Thomas spat. You're angry I left you, so you're trying to destroy me. You destroyed yourself, Eliza's voice rang out. I'm just making sure everyone knows it. The room erupted. Some people were shouting at Thomas, demanding answers. Others were crowding around the ledgers, flipping through pages. A few were still staring at Eliza, skeptical, judgmental. And then, from the back of the room, a man stepped forward. He was older, well-dressed, with the look of someone who'd spent his life counting other people's money. My name is Richard Holt, he said. I'm one of Mr. Wycliffe's creditors, and everything Miss Harrow just said is true. He owes me £3,000, has for 6 months. I've been trying to collect, but he keeps making excuses. Another man stood. He owes me £2,000. Then another. £1,500. One by one, Thomas's creditors revealed themselves, corroborating every word Eliza had said. Thomas's face went white. He looked around wildly, like a trapped animal. This is a setup, he stammered. It's justice, Adrian said quietly. Thomas's gaze locked on Eliza, and for a moment she saw pure hatred there. You'll regret this, he hissed. Then he turned and shoved his way through the crowd, disappearing into the night. The room was chaos, people arguing, examining the ledgers, demanding more information. But Eliza didn't care. She'd done it. She'd told the truth. Her legs gave out. Adrian caught her before she hit the floor, his arm solid around her waist. Easy. I did it, she whispered. Yes, you did. Lady Pemberton approached, her expression unreadable. That was quite a performance. Eliza straightened, pulling away from Adrian. It wasn't a performance. It was the truth. Lady Pemberton studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. I believe you. She glanced around the room. And I suspect you've just done something very few people have the courage to do. What's that? You fought back. Lady Pemberton's voice dropped. My niece was in a similar situation 5 years ago. She stayed silent. It destroyed her. I wish she'd had half your spine. Eliza's throat tightened. Thank you. Lady Pemberton nodded, then moved away. Others approached, some to offer support, some to ask questions, some just to stare. But the energy in the room had shifted. Eliza wasn't the victim anymore. She wasn't the woman left at the altar. She was the woman who'd refused to be silenced. The ball ended near midnight. Most of the guests had left, though a few lingered, still poring over the ledgers. Adrian dismissed them politely, and finally, the house was quiet. Eliza sat in the study, exhausted, her head in her hands. You did well, Adrian said, pouring 2 glasses of brandy. Eliza accepted one gratefully. It doesn't feel like it. That's the adrenaline wearing off. Give it a day. You'll see the impact. Eliza took a sip, the burn grounding her. Thomas won't let this go. No, he won't. What do you think he'll do? Adrian's expression darkened. Something stupid. Men like him always do. The words hung in the air. Eliza set down her glass, her hand still shaking slightly. I couldn't have done this without you. Adrian looked at her, something softening in his gaze. You could have. You just didn't know it yet. Eliza wanted to argue, but she was too tired, too wrung out. She leaned back in the chair, closing her eyes. What happens now? She asked. Now? We wait. We see how London reacts, and we prepare for Thomas's next move. Eliza opened her eyes. Do you think people will believe me? Some will, some won't. But you told your story. That's what matters. Eliza wasn't sure she agreed, but she was too exhausted to debate it. A knock at the door interrupted them. The butler entered, his face grave. Your Grace, There's been an incident. Adrian stood immediately. What kind of incident? A fire, sir. At the Harrow residence. Eliza's heart stopped. What? It started about an hour ago. The household got out safely, but the house is badly damaged. Eliza was on her feet, her mind racing. My parents, they're unharmed, miss. Shaken, but unharmed. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by dread. Was it an accident? The butler hesitated. The fire brigade suspects arson. There was evidence of accelerant. Adrian's jaw tightened. Wycliffe. Eliza felt sick. He wouldn't. Yes, he would. Adrian turned to the butler. Send word to the magistrate. I want investigators on this immediately. And send a carriage to bring the Harrows here. Adrian, my parents won't come. They will if their house is burning. The butler bowed and left. Eliza sank back into the chair, her hands covering her face. This is my fault, she whispered. No, it's Thomas's fault, and he's going to pay for it. Eliza looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. How do we stop him? Adrian's expression was cold, lethal. We don't stop him. We bury him. The carriage arrived an hour later. Eliza watched from the study window as her parents stumbled out, her father's face soot-streaked, her mother's gown singed at the hem. They looked broken, small, nothing like the formidable people who'd raised her. Adrian met them at the door. Eliza heard the murmur of voices, her father's angry protests, her mother's weeping, then footsteps on the stairs. Her parents entered the study like refugees. Her mother wouldn't meet her eyes. Her father's jaw was clenched so tight, Eliza thought his teeth might crack. You have a lot of nerve, he said, his voice shaking. Eliza stood. Papa, don't. Don't you dare act like you care. Our house is gone, Eliza. Everything we built, everything we worked for, gone. Because of you. Because of Thomas, Adrian corrected from the doorway. Her father whirled on him. You think this helps? You think destroying Thomas Wycliffe was worth this? I think, Adrian said coldly, that if Eliza had married him, you'd have lost everything anyway. At least this way, you know who your enemy is. Our enemy is standing right in front of us, her father shouted. You turned our daughter against us. You convinced her to throw away her future, her reputation, our family's good name. Her future was a lie, Adrian said, and you were too blind to see it. Her father lunged. Adrian didn't move, didn't flinch. He just stood there, letting the older man grab his lapels, his face inches away. You've ruined us, her father hissed. No, Adrian said quietly. Thomas ruined you. I just made sure you knew about it. Eliza's mother finally spoke, her voice hollow. Where are we supposed to go? We have nothing left. You can stay here, Adrian said, as long as you need. Her father released him with a shove. We don't want your charity. Then freeze in the street. I don't care. Adrian straightened his coat. But Eliza stays, and if you want to be near her, you'll swallow your pride and accept my help. The silence was suffocating. Her father's hands were shaking. Her mother looked like she might collapse. Eliza found her voice. Papa, please, just for tonight. Her father's eyes finally met hers. The anger there was so raw it made her flinch. You've destroyed this family. Thomas destroyed this family. I just refused to go down with him. Her father's face crumpled. For a terrible moment, Eliza thought he might cry. Then he turned and walked out, her mother trailing behind him. Adrian watched them go, his expression unreadable. They'll come around. No, they won't. Eliza's voice was flat. I've lost them. Then they weren't worth keeping. Eliza wanted to scream at him, wanted to make him understand that it wasn't that simple, but she was too tired, too empty. I need air, she said. She walked past him through the halls, out into the garden. The night was cold, the sky starless. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold the pieces together. Footsteps behind her. Not Adrian, Catherine. Miss, the older woman said gently. Eliza turned. Catherine's face was lined with worry, her eyes soft. I'm fine, Eliza lied. No, you're not. And that's all right. Eliza's composure cracked. I thought if I told the truth, if I fought back, everything would get better. But it's just getting worse. Catherine stepped closer. Change always gets worse before it gets better. You've shaken the whole foundation, child. Of course it's going to feel like everything's collapsing. My parents hate me. Your parents are scared, and people who are scared lash out at the nearest target. Give them time. What if time doesn't help? What if they never forgive me? Catherine took Eliza's hands. Then you grieve them and move forward. Because you did the right thing, even if it cost you everything. Eliza's throat tightened. I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you can. You've already done the hardest part. You told the truth. Now you just have to survive the consequences. Eliza wanted to believe her, but standing in the cold with her parents somewhere inside hating her and Thomas out there planning his next move, it felt impossible. Joe, the magistrate arrived at dawn. His name was Cornelius Reed, a thin man with sharp eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd seen too much and trusted too little. Adrian met with him in the study while Eliza waited outside, pacing. She could hear their voices through the door, Adrian's calm, measured, Reed's skeptical, probing. Finally, the door opened. Reed emerged, tucking a notebook into his coat. Miss Harrow, he said with a nod. Did you find anything? Eliza asked. Traces of lamp oil in 3 separate locations. Whoever set the fire wanted to make sure it spread fast. Reed's mouth thinned. This wasn't an accident. It was Thomas Wycliffe, Eliza said. Reed's eyebrows rose. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. He threatened me 2 days ago. He said I'd regret exposing him. Threatening words aren't proof, Miss Harrow. Then find proof, Adrian said from the doorway. Search his lodgings, question his associates. He's not clever enough to cover his tracks. Or Reed looked between them. You understand that if I pursue this and I'm wrong, Mr. Wycliffe could sue for harassment. He won't sue, Adrian said. He doesn't have the money. Reed sighed. I'll investigate, but I need time. How much time? Eliza asked. A few days, maybe a week. We don't have a week, Adrian said. Every day Thomas is free. He's a threat. Then I suggest you hire private security, Reed said dryly. Because the law moves at its own pace, Your Grace, even for you. He left. Eliza felt the weight of it settle over her. Thomas was out there, angry, desperate, and now they had proof he was willing to burn down her family's home. What do we do? She asked. Adrian was already moving toward his desk. We find him before he does something worse. Adrian's network of informants was vast and frighteningly efficient. By midday, they'd learned that Thomas had been seen at a tavern in Southwark, drinking heavily and ranting about his ruined reputation. By evening, they had an address, a boarding house in one of London's seedier districts. I'm coming with you, Eliza said. Adrian shook his head. Absolutely not. He's my problem too. Which is exactly why you're staying here. If he sees you, he'll do something stupid. He's already done something stupid. He burned down my house. And I'm not giving him a chance to hurt you. Adrian's voice was firm. You've been brave enough, Eliza. Let me handle this. Eliza wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't condescension. It was fear. He was afraid for her. Promise me you'll be careful, she said. I'm always careful. Adrian? He paused at the door, looking back at her. I promise. Then he was gone. Eliza paced the study for hours, her mind racing. Every sound made her jump. Every creak of the house felt like a threat. Catherine tried to get her to eat, but she couldn't stomach food. By midnight, Adrian still hadn't returned. Eliza's worry turned to panic. She was about to send for the footman when she heard the front door open. She ran into the hall. Adrian stood there, disheveled, his coat torn, blood on his knuckles. What happened? Eliza demanded. Thomas wasn't at the boarding house. Adrian's jaw was tight, but his landlord was. And he was very helpful once I convinced him. Convinced him? Adrian held up his bloodied hand. Persuasively. Eliza's stomach turned. Adrian, Thomas has been hiding out at an old warehouse near the docks. Apparently he's been stockpiling his remaining possessions there, trying to figure out how to sell them and flee the country. So what do? We go there. Tomorrow. With the magistrate and enough witnesses that Thomas can't weasel his way out. Eliza nodded, but something felt wrong. What if he runs again? Then we chase him. Adrian started toward the stairs, but Eliza caught his arm. Wait, let me clean that. He looked at his hand like he'd forgotten about it. It's nothing. It's not nothing. Sit down. She led him back to the study, found the medical supplies Catherine kept in a cabinet, and made him sit while she cleaned the cuts on his knuckles. His hands were larger than she'd expected, calloused, strong. You didn't have to do this, she said quietly. Yes, I did. Why? Why risk yourself for me? Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then, because you remind me of her, Charlotte. The way you refuse to back down even when it would be easier. The way you fight even when you're terrified. His voice roughened. I couldn't save her, but I can save you. Eliza's hand stilled. I'm not Charlotte. I know. And I don't need saving. I just need... She stopped, unsure what she was trying to say. Adrian looked up at her and something shifted in his expression. Something vulnerable. What do you need? Eliza's breath caught. She was suddenly very aware of how close they were, how his hand felt under hers, how his eyes were no longer cold but searching. I need, she said slowly, to know that I'm not doing this alone. You're not, Adrian said. You haven't been since the moment I walked into that chapel. Eliza's heart was pounding. She should pull away, should create distance, but she didn't want to. Adrian, a crash from the hallway made them both jump. Eliza's father stood in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. How dare you, he said, his voice shaking. Eliza stood quickly. Papa, it's not... I saw you. I saw the way he looks at you, the way you look at him. Her father's hands were fists. You've thrown away your reputation, your family, everything, for him? That's not what this is, Eliza said, but her face was burning. Isn't it? You're living in his house, unchaperoned, spending every moment together. I'm protecting her, Adrian said, standing. You're ruining her, her father roared. She had a future. She had prospects, and you've turned her into what? Eliza demanded. A woman who refuses to be used? A woman who fights for herself? I'm sorry that embarrasses you, but I'm not sorry I did it. Her father's face went red. You ungrateful. Enough. Adrian's voice cut through the room like a blade. You can blame me all you want. You can hate me, but you will not stand in my house and berate your daughter for refusing to be a victim. This is your fault. No, this is Thomas Wycliffe's fault. And if you can't see that, then you're a fool. Her father lunged. Adrian caught him by the wrist, stopping him mid-swing. Don't, Adrian said quietly. You'll regret it. For a moment they stood frozen. Then her father wrenched free, breathing hard. You're poison, he spat. Both of you. He turned and stormed out. Eliza heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard a door slam. She sank into the chair, her hands shaking. He's never going to forgive me. Adrian knelt in front of her, his expression serious. Then that's his loss. You don't understand. He's my father. I can't just cut him out. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to stop letting his anger make you doubt yourself. Eliza looked at him, this man who'd upended her entire life, who'd given her the tools to fight back, who looked at her like she was worth protecting. What happens when this is over? She asked. When Thomas is arrested, when the scandal dies down, what happens to us? Adrian's jaw tightened. I don't know. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Eliza wanted to push, wanted to demand more, but she could see the walls going back up. Whatever moment they'd had was gone. I should sleep, she said. Adrian nodded and stood. Tomorrow, we end this. They went to the warehouse at dawn, accompanied by Magistrate Reed and 4 constables. The building was decrepit, half collapsed, surrounded by the stench of the Thames at low tide. Reed knocked on the door. No answer. Mr. Wycliffe, Reed called. This is the magistrate. Open the door. Silence. Adrian glanced at one of the constables. Break it down. The man didn't hesitate. 2 solid kicks, and the door splintered open. Inside, the warehouse was chaos. Furniture stacked haphazardly, trunks overflowing with clothes, paintings leaning against walls. And in the center of it all, Thomas Wycliffe, holding a pistol. Eliza's blood went cold. "Stay back," Thomas said, his voice shaking. The gun was pointed at Adrian. Reed held up his hands. "Mr. Wycliffe, put the weapon down. This doesn't have to get worse." "Worse?" Thomas laughed, bitter and broken. "How could it possibly get worse? I've lost everything, my reputation, my money, my future, all because of them." "You lost everything because you gambled it away," Adrian said calmly. "We just made sure people knew the truth." "The truth?" Thomas's hand trembled. "The truth is that I was desperate. I made mistakes, but I was going to fix it. I was going to make everything right." "By stealing from me?" Eliza asked, her voice steady despite her terror. Thomas's eyes locked on her. "You don't understand. I loved you. I really did. But I was drowning, and you were the only way out. So you were going to use me and throw me away. I was going to save us both. By ruining me?" Eliza stepped forward, ignoring Adrian's warning hand on her arm. "You would have taken my money, paid your debts, and disappeared, and I would have been left with nothing. Don't pretend this was about love." Thomas's face twisted. "You think you're so righteous, so much better than me. But you're just as bad. You paraded my debts in front of everyone, humiliated me. You humiliated yourself when you ran from our wedding." "Because he gave me no choice." Thomas swung the gun toward Adrian. "He threatened me. He said he'd destroy me if I didn't leave. And I meant it," Adrian said. "So this is your fault, all of it." Thomas's finger moved to the trigger. Eliza's heart stopped. She moved without thinking, stepping between Thomas and Adrian. "Eliza, don't—" Adrian grabbed for her, but she was already in the line of fire. "If you're going to shoot someone," she said, her voice shaking, "shoot me." Thomas stared at her, wild-eyed. "What?" "I'm the one who exposed you. I'm the one who stood in front of society and told them what you did. If you want revenge, take it, but leave him out of it." "Eliza." Adrian's voice was raw. She didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on Thomas. "Go ahead, pull the trigger, but you'll hang for it. And then you'll have lost everything and killed someone. Is that what you want?" Thomas's hand was shaking so badly the gun wavered. Tears streamed down his face. "I just wanted a way out." "There's always a way out," Eliza said quietly, "but not this one." For a long, terrible moment, Thomas stood there, the gun pointed at her chest. Then slowly his arm dropped. The pistol clattered to the floor. Thomas sank to his knees, sobbing. The constables moved immediately, grabbing him, pulling his arms behind his back. Reed picked up the pistol, his face grim. "Thomas Wycliffe," Reed said, "you're under arrest for arson and attempted murder." Thomas didn't resist. He just kept crying, broken and pathetic. Adrian pulled Eliza away, his hands on her shoulders, his face pale. "What the hell were you thinking?" "I was thinking he was going to shoot you." "So you decided to let him shoot you instead?" "I wasn't going to let him hurt you," Eliza said, her voice fierce. Adrian stared at her, something raw and unguarded in his expression. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Don't ever do that again," he said into her hair. Eliza's heart was racing. She could feel his pulse against her cheek, fast and hard. "I can't promise that," she whispered. Adrian pulled back just enough to look at her. "Eliza." "Miss Harrow." Reed approached, his expression serious. "I'll need a statement from you. And from the Duke." Eliza nodded, reluctantly stepping out of Adrian's arms. "Of course." As Reed led them outside, Eliza glanced back at Thomas. He was being hauled into a carriage, still weeping, still broken. She should have felt triumphant, victorious. But all she felt was tired. "It's over," Adrian said quietly. Eliza looked up at him. "Is it?" "The legal part, yes. Thomas will go to trial. He'll be convicted, and you'll be free of him." "And then what?" Adrian's expression shuddered. "Then you rebuild your life." "Without you?" He didn't answer, and that silence told Eliza everything she needed to know. The ride back to Ashford House was quiet. Adrian stared out the window, his jaw tight. Eliza sat across from him, her mind spinning. She'd just stepped in front of a gun for him. He'd held her like she was the only thing keeping him together. and now he was pulling away again, retreating behind his walls. "Why won't you talk to me?" she asked finally. Adrian didn't look at her. "There's nothing to talk about." "That's a lie. Eliza, you said you'd teach me to fight. You said you'd help me survive this, and you did. But now that Thomas is gone, you're acting like we're strangers." "We're not strangers." "Then what are we?" Adrian's hands clenched. "I don't know." "Yes, you do. You're just too afraid to say it." He finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes made her chest ache. "I can't do this, Eliza." "Why not?" "Because I failed Charlotte, and I won't fail you by dragging you into my mess." "What mess?" Adrian turned away. "I told you. I've spent 5 years hunting men like Thomas, destroying them, making enemies of half of London's elite. And if you stay with me, if you tie your life to mine, you'll be caught in the crossfire." "I don't care." "You should." "Well, I don't." Eliza leaned forward. "I've lost my family. I've lost my reputation. I've watched my house burn and my groom get arrested. I've stood in front of a gun. And through all of it, the only person who's been there, the only person who's made me feel like I'm not alone, is you." Adrian's throat worked. "Eliza. So don't tell me you're protecting me by pushing me away, because the only thing that would hurt me now is losing you." The carriage stopped. They were back at Ashford House. Adrian opened the door and stepped out, then turned to help her down. But he didn't let go of her hand. "This is a mistake," he said quietly. "Then we'll make it together." Adrian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You're stubborn." "I learned from the best." He pulled her closer, his free hand brushing her cheek. "If we do this, if you stay, there's no going back. People will talk. Your parents will disown you. Society will judge you. Let them." Adrian searched her face like he was looking for doubt, but Eliza didn't have any left. She'd burned through all her hesitation in that warehouse. "All right," he said finally. "Stay." Eliza's heart soared. "Yes." Adrian leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "You're going to regret this." "Never." And then, in the fading light, in front of anyone who might be watching, Adrian kissed her. It was fierce and desperate and full of everything he'd been holding back. Eliza kissed him back, her hands fisting in his coat, her heart pounding. When they finally pulled apart, she was breathless. "Well," she said shakily, "that just made everything more complicated." Adrian laughed, actually laughed. "Yes, it did." They walked into the house together, hand in hand. Whatever came next, scandal, judgment, her parents' fury, they'd face it. But as they reached the study, the butler appeared, his face pale. "Your Grace, there's a problem." Adrian's expression hardened. "What kind of problem?" "A letter from Mr. Wycliffe's barrister. He's claiming that Mr. Wycliffe was coerced into confessing, that you and Miss Harrow fabricated evidence." The butler hesitated. "He's demanding a formal hearing, and he's calling witnesses, including your former business associates, people who might have reasons to discredit you." Eliza's stomach dropped. "Can he do that?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "He can try." "But we have proof. We have the ledgers, the creditors. And Thomas has a barrister who's very good at twisting facts." Adrian's voice went cold. "This isn't over, not even close." Eliza felt the weight of it settle over her. They'd won the battle, but the war was just beginning. The hearing was set for 3 days later. 3 days that felt like 3 years. Adrian's study became a war room. Legal documents covered every surface. Witnesses were interviewed and re-interviewed. Strategies were mapped and discarded and rebuilt. Eliza barely slept, surviving on tea and stubborn determination. Thomas's barrister was a man named Horace Grimsby, known throughout London for getting guilty men acquitted through sheer audacity and manipulation of procedure. He'd already sent over a list of his witnesses, former business partners of Adrian's, society members who'd lost money in ventures Adrian had exposed as fraudulent, even a distant cousin who claimed Adrian had stolen family property. "They're all lying," Adrian said, his voice tight as he read through the depositions. "Can you prove that?" Eliza asked. "Some of them, but proving it takes time, and Grimsby knows it. He's counting on the judge being swayed by volume over substance." Magistrate Reed sat across from them, looking haggard. The problem is perception. Thomas presents as a wrong gentleman driven to desperation by a powerful duke's vendetta. You present as what? Adrian's eyes were cold. Reed shifted uncomfortably. As someone with a history of destroying reputations. Deservedly or not, you've made enemies. And Grimsby is calling all of them. Eliza's hands clenched. So what do? We fight, Adrian said. We bring our own witnesses, the creditors, the fire investigators, everyone who can speak to Thomas's character. That's defensive, Reed said. Grimsby will frame it as you scrambling to justify your vendetta. Then what do you suggest? Reed hesitated. You need to change the narrative entirely. Stop defending your actions and start attacking his. Make this about Thomas's crimes, not your motivations. How? Eliza asked. Reed looked at her thoughtfully. You testified at the ball. You presented evidence publicly. If you do the same thing at the hearing, if you make Thomas defend himself rather than making the Duke defend his methods. She's not testifying, Adrian said flatly. Why not? Eliza demanded. Because Grimsby will tear you apart. He'll attack your credibility, your relationship with me, your motivations. Let him try. Adrian stood, pacing. You don't understand what he'll do. He'll make you look vindictive, scorned, irrational. I don't care what he makes me look like. I care about the truth. The truth doesn't always win in court. Then we make it win. Eliza stood too, meeting Adrian's eyes. You told me to tell my story. That's what I did at the ball, and it worked, so I'll do it again. Under oath, in front of a judge, and I dare Thomas or his barrister to prove I'm lying. Adrian's jaw worked. Eliza, I'm testifying. You can't stop me. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Adrian turned to Reed. If she testifies, you keep Grimsby on a short leash. No character assassination, no. I'll do my best, Reed said. But this is a hearing, not a trial. The rules are looser. Then make new rules. Reed gave him a dry look. I'm a magistrate, not a king. Adrian's mouth twitched despite everything. Fine, but if Grimsby crosses a line, I'm dragging him out of that courtroom myself. That would be unwise, Your Grace. I don't care. Eliza touched Adrian's arm. Let me handle Grimsby. You focus on your witnesses. Adrian looked at her hand on his sleeve, then at her face. Something in his expression softened. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. He nodded slowly. All right. But we prepare. Every question Grimsby might ask, every angle he might take, we anticipate all of it. They worked through the night. Adrian played Grimsby, firing hostile questions at Eliza until she could answer without hesitation. Catherine brought food that mostly went uneaten. Reed came and went, bringing updates and advice. By dawn, Eliza's voice was hoarse, but she was ready. One more thing, Adrian said as the first light crept through the windows. He pulled a small box from his desk drawer and handed it to her. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single sapphire set in silver. Eliza's breath caught. What is this? It was Charlotte's. She wanted me to give it to someone who understood what it meant to fight for yourself. Adrian's voice was rough. I think she'd want you to have it. Eliza's throat tightened. Adrian, I can't. You can, and you will. Wear it today. Remind yourself that you're not alone in that courtroom. Eliza slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Thank you. Adrian pulled her close, kissing her forehead. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when this is over. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls, craning their necks to see. Eliza sat beside Adrian at the front, her hands folded to hide their shaking. Across the aisle, Thomas sat with Grimsby, looking cleaner than he had at the warehouse, but still haggard, still desperate. The judge entered. Lord Justice Pemberton, a stern man in his 60s with a reputation for impartiality that bordered on coldness. Everyone rose, then sat at his gesture. This hearing, Pemberton began, will determine whether sufficient evidence exists to proceed with charges against Mr. Thomas Wycliffe for arson and attempted murder, and whether said charges were brought in good faith or as part of a personal vendetta. Mr. Grimsby, you may begin. Grimsby stood, tall and imposing, with a voice like honey over steel. Thank you, Your Honor. I will demonstrate that my client, Mr. Wycliffe, is the victim of a calculated campaign of destruction orchestrated by the Duke of Ashford, aided and abetted by Miss Eliza Harrow, a woman scorned and seeking revenge for a broken engagement. Eliza's fingernails dug into her palms. Adrian's hand found hers under the table, squeezing once. Grimsby called his first witness, one of Adrian's former business associates, a man named Reginald Cartwright, who claimed Adrian had sabotaged his shipping venture 3 years ago. He spread rumors, Cartwright said, his voice bitter. Told investors I was mismanaging funds. It wasn't true, but the damage was done. I lost everything. And did the Duke ever apologize? Grimsby asked. No. He moved on to his next target. Reed cross-examined. Mr. Cartwright, were you in fact mismanaging funds? There were some irregularities, but yes or no, Mr. Cartwright? Cartwright's face reddened. Yes, but I was trying to fix it. So the Duke's claims were accurate. That's not the point. I think it is precisely the point. No further questions. Grimsby called 3 more witnesses, each with similar stories. Businesses destroyed, reputations ruined, all by Adrian's interference. But under Reed's cross-examination, each one admitted to some form of fraud or misconduct. The pattern was clear. Adrian didn't destroy innocent men. He destroyed guilty ones. But Grimsby wasn't finished. I call Miss Eliza Harrow to the stand. Eliza stood, her legs unsteady. She walked to the witness box, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Grimsby smiled. It wasn't kind. Miss Harrow, how long have you known the Duke of Ashford? 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And yet you're living in his home, unchaperoned. Isn't that correct? Yes. Isn't it also true that the Duke orchestrated the collapse of your engagement to Mr. Wycliffe? He exposed Thomas's fraud. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? Grimsby's voice sharpened. My client claims the Duke approached him days before your wedding, threatened him with financial ruin if he didn't flee. Is that true? Eliza hesitated. Adrian had threatened Thomas. That was true. But the context? Mr. Wycliffe was planning to steal my dowry, she said. The Duke stopped him. Or did the Duke fabricate evidence to justify his threats? Tell me, Miss Harrow, did you see these alleged ledgers before the Duke presented them to you? No, but... So you took his word for it, a man you'd known for mere days. The creditors confirmed the debts. Thomas himself confessed. Under duress, after being hunted down and cornered like an animal. Grimsby turned to the judge. Your Honor, I submit that Miss Harrow is a willing participant in the Duke's vendetta, motivated by wounded pride and a desire to punish Mr. Wycliffe for rejecting her. Eliza's temper flared. He didn't reject me. He abandoned me at the altar in front of 300 people because he was a coward and a fraud. Or because the Duke forced him to. The Duke gave him a choice, flee or be exposed. Thomas chose to flee. That's not coercion, that's consequence. Grimsby's smile widened. And when Mr. Wycliffe returned to plead his case, what happened? The Duke assaulted him. You were there, weren't you? Eliza's heart sank. She had been there. She'd watched Adrian grab Thomas, threaten him. He didn't assault him, she said carefully. He restrained him. By throwing him against a wall? Thomas was making threats, as is his right when falsely accused. Reed stood. Objection. Counsel is testifying. Pemberton nodded. Sustained. Mr. Grimsby, ask questions or sit down. Grimsby bowed slightly. Miss Harrow, isn't it true that you have developed romantic feelings for the Duke of Ashford? The courtroom went silent. Eliza's face burned. That's irrelevant, she said. Chichad. Is it? You're living in his home. You're wearing a ring. He gestured to Charlotte's sapphire. That suggests a certain intimacy. It seems to me that you have every reason to support his version of events, regardless of the truth. I support his version because it is the truth, or because you're in love with him. Eliza met Grimsby's eyes. Yes, I am, but that doesn't make me a liar. The courtroom erupted. Whispers, gasps, scandalized murmurs. Pemberton banged his gavel. Order! Grimsby looked triumphant. No further questions. Reed stood. Miss Harrow, before your engagement to Mr. Wycliffe, did you have any romantic relationship with the Duke of Ashford? No, I didn't even know he existed. So any feelings you have developed came after he exposed Mr. Wycliffe's fraud? Yes. And you testified at the ball, presented evidence to society before any romantic relationship began, correct? Correct. So your testimony today is consistent with what you've been saying from the beginning? Yes. Reed turned to the judge. Your Honor, Miss Harrow's personal feelings don't change the facts. Mr. Wycliffe was in debt. He planned to use Miss Harrow's dowry fraudulently. He fled when confronted. He set fire to the Harrow residence. These are documented facts, corroborated by multiple witnesses. Pemberton leaned back. I'll take that under advisement. Mr. Grimsby, call your next witness. Grimsby hesitated. He'd expected Eliza to crumble under questioning, to contradict herself or get flustered, but she hadn't. She'd admitted her feelings for Adrian and still held her ground. I call Mr. Thomas Wycliffe, Grimsby said finally. Thomas took the stand looking like a man heading to the gallows. He swore the oath with a shaking hand. Grimsby led him through the story carefully. Thomas claimed he'd been in debt, yes, but was working to resolve it. Claimed Adrian had threatened to destroy him unless he disappeared. Claimed the fire was an accident. He'd gone to the Harrow residence to retrieve some personal items and knocked over a lamp. And the pistol at the warehouse? Grimsby asked. I was afraid, Thomas said. The Duke had already ruined me. I thought he might kill me. So you brought a weapon to defend yourself? Yes. It was a reasonable story, almost believable if you didn't know the truth. Reed stood for cross-examination. Mr. Wycliffe, you claim the Duke threatened you. Do you have any proof of these threats? He said them to my face. Any written correspondence? Witnesses? No, but you claim the fire was an accident, yet investigators found traces of lamp oil in 3 separate locations. Can you explain that? Thomas's face went pale. I must have spilled it when I was moving things. 3 times? In 3 different rooms? I was panicking. You also claimed you went to retrieve personal items. What items? I don't remember exactly. You don't remember what you risked your life to retrieve from a burning building? Thomas's hands twisted. I was confused, upset. Mr. Wycliffe, did you or did you not send threatening letters to Miss Harrow after the failed wedding? They weren't threats. I was trying to explain. In one letter you said, and I quote, "You'll regret this." Is that correct? Thomas hesitated. Yes, but I didn't mean... And 3 days later, Miss Harrow's family home burned down. That was coincidence. Was it? Reed's voice was sharp. You sent threatening letters. You were confronted about your debts and fled. You set fire to a building. You pulled a gun on 2 people. At what point, Mr. Wycliffe, does coincidence become pattern? Thomas's composure shattered. I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do. So you admit you set the fire? No, Thomas realized too late what he'd walked into. I mean, you just said you were desperate and didn't know what else to do. Desperate to do what, Mr. Wycliffe, if not to punish Miss Harrow for exposing you? I didn't set the fire. But Thomas's voice cracked, and everyone in that courtroom could hear the lie. Reed turned to Pemberton. Your Honor, Mr. Wycliffe's own testimony confirms his guilt. He's contradicted himself repeatedly, admitted to threatening Miss Harrow, and failed to provide any credible alternative explanation for the fire or the weapon. The charges should stand. Pemberton looked at Thomas, who sat trembling in the witness box. Then he looked at the stack of evidence on his desk, the ledgers, the fire investigation reports, the witness depositions. Mr. Grimsby, Pemberton said, do you have any evidence that refutes the charges beyond your client's word? Grimsby's jaw tightened. Your Honor, my client's credibility is severely damaged by his own testimony. Unless you have something concrete, I'm inclined to agree with Magistrate Reed. Grimsby looked at Thomas, who stared back helplessly. Then Grimsby sighed. No, Your Honor, I have nothing further. Pemberton nodded. Then I find sufficient cause to proceed with charges of arson and attempted murder against Mr. Thomas Wycliffe. He will remain in custody pending trial. As for the allegations against the Duke of Ashford, he looked at Adrian. While your methods are unorthodox, Your Grace, I find no evidence of impropriety in this matter. The charges against you are dismissed. The courtroom erupted. Relief, outrage, shock, all of it mixing into chaos. Adrian's hand found Eliza's again, squeezing hard. It's over, he murmured. But Eliza was watching Thomas as he was led away in chains. He looked back at her once, his eyes full of hatred and something else, regret, maybe. Or just despair. She didn't feel victorious, she felt exhausted. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. News traveled fast in London, and everyone wanted to see the aftermath. Eliza stepped out beside Adrian, and the noise hit her like a wave. Some people were shouting congratulations. Others were jeering, calling her a harlot, saying she'd seduced the Duke to get revenge. Eliza kept her head high, refusing to flinch. A woman pushed through the crowd, Lady Pemberton, the judge's wife, who'd spoken to Eliza at the ball. "Miss Harrow," she said, her voice cutting through the din, "I want you to know that what you did today took extraordinary courage." Eliza blinked. "Thank you. I mean it. Too many women stay silent when they're wronged. You didn't. You fought back and you won." Lady Pemberton glanced at the crowd. "They'll talk. They always do. But the ones who matter, they'll remember that you told the truth when it wasn't easy." She walked away, leaving Eliza staring after her. Adrian guided Eliza to the carriage. Once inside, the noise faded, replaced by silence. "You were incredible," Adrian said. Eliza leaned her head back against the seat. "I don't feel incredible. I feel like I've been run over by a carriage." Adrian smiled faintly. "That's the adrenaline wearing off. What happens now? Now Thomas goes to trial. He'll be convicted, and you'll finally be free of him." Eliza turned the sapphire ring on her finger. "And us? What happens with us?" Adrian's expression grew serious. "That depends on you." "On me? You've tied your name to mine now, publicly. Society will assume we're engaged, or worse. If you want to salvage your reputation, you should leave. Go somewhere new, start over." "Is that what you want?" "No." Adrian's voice was rough. "But it's what's best for you." Eliza reached across the carriage and took his hand. "I don't care what's best for me. I care about what's true. And the truth is, I don't want to leave. I want to stay with you, whatever that means." Adrian stared at their joined hands. "You could still have a normal life, a safe life." "I don't want safe, I want real." "Eliza, do you want me to stay or not?" she demanded. "Because if you're going to push me away again, just say so now and save us both the trouble." Adrian's mouth twitched. "You're infuriating." "I learned from you." He pulled her across the carriage onto his lap, kissing her hard. Eliza kissed him back, her hands in his hair, her heart pounding. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "Stay." "I already said I would." "I know, but I needed to hear myself say it." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "This won't be easy. People will talk. Your parents—" "My parents made their choice. I've made mine." Adrian's arms tightened around her. "Then we'll face it together." When they arrived back at Ashford House, Eliza's parents were waiting in the drawing room. Catherine must have let them in. Her mother stood when Eliza entered, her face pale. Her father remained seated, staring at the floor. "We heard about the hearing," her mother said quietly. "Good news travels fast," Eliza said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Her mother flinched. "Eliza, please. Can we talk? Alone?" Eliza glanced at Adrian, who nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Her mother wrung her hands. "I owe you an apology." Eliza crossed her arms. "For which part? Slapping me? Blaming me for the fire? Or disowning me?" "All of it." Her mother's voice cracked. "I was scared. I thought if I could just make you be quiet, make you disappear, everything would go back to normal. But it wouldn't have. Thomas would have ruined you, and I would have helped him do it." Eliza's throat tightened. "Why didn't you believe me?" "Because believing you meant admitting I was wrong, that I'd pushed you toward a man who would have destroyed you, and I couldn't." I couldn't face that. Tears streamed down her mother's face. Her father finally looked up, his eyes red. Your mother's right, he said hoarsely. We failed you, and I'm sorry. Eliza wanted to stay angry, wanted to make them hurt the way they'd hurt her, but she was so tired of fighting. I'm not coming home, she said. Her mother nodded. I know. I'm staying here, with Adrian. Her father's jaw tightened. Are you engaged? Not yet, but we will be. He closed his eyes. People will say terrible things. Let them. I've survived worse. Her mother stepped forward. Can you forgive us? Eventually? Eliza looked at them, her parents, broken and ashamed. And she realized something. They weren't villains, they were just scared people who'd made bad choices when it mattered most. I don't know, she said honestly, but I'm willing to try, if you are. Her mother pulled her into a fierce hug. Eliza let herself be held, let herself cry for the first time since this whole nightmare began. When her parents finally left, Eliza found Adrian in the study. He looked up from his papers. How did it go? Better than I expected. Worse than I hoped. Eliza sat beside him. They apologized. I think they meant it. That's good. Is it? I'm not sure forgiveness is supposed to feel this complicated. Adrian set down his pen. Nothing worth doing is simple. Eliza leaned against him, bone-tired. What happens when Thomas's trial ends? We start rebuilding. Your reputation, your life, everything. Our life, Eliza corrected. Adrian kissed the top of her head. Our life. The next morning, invitations started arriving. Not threatening letters or legal summons, actual invitations. To dinners, to soirees, to garden parties. From families Eliza had thought would never speak to her again. Lady Pemberton's was the first, then others followed. People who'd been at the hearing, who'd heard Eliza testify, who'd watched her refuse to back down. They're curious, Adrian said, reading through the pile. Or they want to gawk at the scandal. Maybe, but some of them genuinely respect what you did. Eliza picked up Lady Pemberton's invitation. It was for a dinner party, 3 days away. Should we go? Do you want to? Eliza thought about it. Thought about walking into a room full of people who judged her, pitied her, whispered about her. And then she thought about walking in beside Adrian, wearing Charlotte's ring, with her head held high. Yes, she said. Let's go. Adrian smiled. Then we'll go. But the dinner party was everything Eliza expected and nothing like it at the same time. People stared, yes. Whispered, yes. But when Lady Pemberton introduced Eliza as the woman who stood up for herself when no one else would, the room's energy shifted. A young woman approached Eliza during drinks. Miss Harrow, I just wanted to say, what you did was extraordinary. My sister was in a similar situation last year. She didn't fight back. She's miserable now, married to a man who treats her like property. The woman's eyes shone. You give me hope that things can be different. Eliza's throat tightened. Thank you. Another woman joined them. I was at the hearing. The way you stood up to that barrister, I've never seen anything like it. More women gathered, asking questions, sharing their own stories of bad marriages and broken engagements, and the quiet suffering society demanded of them. And Eliza realized something. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She'd become something bigger, a symbol. Proof that women didn't have to accept mistreatment just because it was expected. Adrian found her later, surrounded by a circle of women hanging on her every word. You're causing a revolution, he murmured. Eliza laughed. I'm just telling the truth. That's how revolutions start. As they left the party, Eliza felt lighter than she had in weeks. The whispers were still there, the judgment, the scandal. But alongside them was something new. Respect. The respect didn't come easy, and it didn't come all at once. But it came. Over the next month, Eliza found herself navigating a London that looked the same but felt entirely different. Doors that had been slammed shut started opening. Not all of them. There were still plenty of matrons who turned their noses up, still men who looked at her like she was damaged goods. But enough changed that Eliza could feel the shift in the air. Thomas's trial began on a gray Tuesday morning. Eliza didn't attend. She'd said everything she needed to say at the hearing, and watching him get sentenced felt less like justice and more like watching someone drown. Adrian went, along with Reed, and came back looking grim. "Guilty on all counts," he said, finding Eliza in the garden where she'd been trying to read the same page for an hour. 7 years. Eliza set down her book. 7 years. He'll serve 4, probably. Maybe less if he behaves. She didn't know how to feel. Relief? Satisfaction? All she felt was tired. Does this mean it's really over? Adrian sat beside her on the bench. The legal part, yes. The rest? He shrugged. That depends on us. Eliza leaned against his shoulder. What do you want? I want, Adrian said slowly, to stop waiting for the next disaster. I want to wake up and not immediately think about who I need to destroy that day. I want... He stopped, his jaw working. What? I want a life that isn't just revenge. Eliza turned to look at him. Then let's have one. Adrian's mouth twisted. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I've spent 5 years making enemies. Those people don't just forgive and forget. And if I stop, if I let my guard down, then we deal with it together. Eliza took his hand. You told me once that I was stronger than I thought. Well, so are you. You're more than what happened to Charlotte. You're more than the man who destroys frauds. Adrian looked at their joined hands. What if I don't know how to be anything else? Then we figure it out, together. For a long moment, Adrian didn't respond. Then he pulled Eliza close and kissed her, slow and deep and full of something that felt like hope. When they broke apart, Eliza was breathless. Was that a yes? Adrian smiled, really smiled. Not the sardonic twist she was used to, but something genuine. That was a yes. But 2 weeks later, the announcement appeared in the Morning Post. The Duke of Ashford is pleased to announce his engagement to Miss Eliza Harrow. The wedding will take place at St. Clement's Chapel in 6 weeks. The same chapel where Thomas had abandoned her. Eliza had insisted on it. People will talk, Adrian had warned. Let them. I'm not running from that place. I'm reclaiming it. The announcement sent shockwaves through London society. Some called it romantic. Others called it scandalous. A few called it outright insane. But everyone had an opinion, and for once, Eliza didn't care. Her mother visited the day after the announcement, bringing fabric samples and a tentative smile. I thought you might want help planning, she said. Eliza looked at the samples, silks and satins in shades of cream and ivory. I'm not wearing white, her mother blinked. What? White is for virgins and martyrs. I'm neither. Eliza, I'm wearing deep blue. The color of the dress I wore to the hearing, the color I was wearing when I told the truth. Her mother set down the samples slowly. You're sure? Completely. To Eliza's surprise, her mother laughed. You know what? Good. White washes you out anyway. They spent the afternoon planning, not the wedding her mother had dreamed of, but the one Eliza wanted. Small, intimate, real. No spectacle, no performance, just vows spoken in front of people who actually mattered. Your father wants to walk you down the aisle, her mother said as she was leaving. Eliza hesitated. Does he? He's too proud to ask. But yes, he does. I'll think about it. Her mother paused at the door. I know I can't undo what I said, what I did. But I'm trying, Eliza. I hope that counts for something. It does, Eliza said, and she meant it. 3 weeks before the wedding, a letter arrived. Eliza recognized the handwriting immediately and nearly threw it in the fire unread. But curiosity won. Eliza, I know you have no reason to read this, no reason to care what I think, but I need you to know something. You were right. I was a coward. I ran when I should have faced you. I lied when I should have told the truth. I tried to use you, and when that failed, I tried to destroy you. And you still won. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that sitting in this cell, with nothing but time to think, I finally understand what I threw away. Not your money, not your family's connections. You. You're stronger than I ever was. Braver. Better. And the Duke is a lucky man. I hope you're happy. I really do." Thomas Eliza read it twice, then set it aside. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel vindication. She just felt done. She showed the letter to Adrian that evening. He read it without expression, then handed it back. "Regret is easy when you're facing consequences," he said. "Do you think he means it?" "Does it matter?" Eliza thought about it. "No, I don't think it does." Adrian pulled her into his lap. "Good, because I'm tired of talking about Thomas Wycliffe. I'd rather talk about our wedding night." Eliza's face heated. "Adrian? What?" "We're engaged. We're allowed to discuss it." "We're not discussing it. You're being scandalous. You're marrying a scandalous man. You should probably get used to it." Eliza kissed him to shut him up, and they didn't talk about Thomas again. The night before the wedding, Eliza couldn't sleep. She stood at the window of her room, the same room she'd been staying in for months now, though Adrian had made it clear that after tomorrow, she'd be moving into his. A soft knock at the door. Catherine entered carrying a tray with tea. "Thought you might be awake," she said. Eliza took the cup gratefully. "Is it normal to be terrified the night before your wedding?" "Depends on the wedding. If you're marrying someone you don't love, yes, you should be terrified. If you're marrying someone you do love." Catherine smiled. "That's just nerves." "What if I mess it up?" "Then you apologize and try again. That's what marriage is. Trying again." Eliza sipped her tea. "Did you ever marry?" Catherine's expression softened. "Once, long time ago. He died young, accident on the docks. We only had 3 years together." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. They were good years, and I'd rather have had 3 good years than 30 bad ones." She patted Eliza's hand. "You're going to be fine, child. You're marrying a good man who loves you. The rest is just details." After Catherine left, Eliza tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the chapel, saw herself walking down that aisle again, except this time Adrian would be waiting. She must have dozed eventually because she woke to sunlight streaming through the window and Catherine shaking her shoulder. "Up, miss. Today's the day." Listen. The chapel looked different in daylight, less imposing, more like what it was, just a building where people made promises. Eliza stood in the antechamber, wearing the deep blue gown she'd commissioned. It was simpler than a traditional wedding dress, elegant rather than ornate. She'd left her hair mostly down, just a few pins holding it back. Her father appeared in the doorway, looking older and smaller than she remembered. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." He cleared his throat. "I know I haven't been the father you deserved. These past months I've been angry and scared and stupid. But I'm here now, if you'll have me." Eliza looked at him, really looked at him, and she saw not the man who'd blamed her for everything, but the man who'd taught her to ride a horse when she was 6. The man who'd carried her to bed when she fell asleep reading. The man who was flawed and human and trying. "I'll have you," she said. He offered his arm. She took it. The chapel doors opened. The crowd was smaller this time, maybe 50 people, all of them invited because Eliza actually wanted them there. Lady Pemberton sat in the front row, beaming. Reed was there, looking uncomfortable in formal clothes. Even Grimsby had shown up, which surprised Eliza until Adrian later admitted he'd invited him just to prove a point. And at the altar, Adrian stood waiting. He was wearing black, as always, but something about the way he looked at Eliza made her breath catch. Her father walked her down the aisle. This time there was no panic, no dread, just certainty. When they reached the altar, her father placed her hand in Adrian's. "Take care of her," he said quietly. "Always," Adrian replied. The vicar began the ceremony. Eliza barely heard the words. She was too focused on Adrian, on the way his hand held hers, on the slight tremor she could feel in his fingers. He was nervous too. Somehow that made her feel better. When it came time for the vows, Adrian spoke first. "I, Adrian Blackwood, take you, Eliza Harrow, to be my wife. I promise to stand beside you when you fight. I promise to catch you when you fall. I promise to tell you the truth, even when it's hard. And I promise to love you, not because you need me to, but because I can't help it." Eliza's throat tightened. Then it was her turn. I, Eliza Harrow, take you, Adrian Blackwood, to be my husband. I promise to challenge you when you're wrong. I promise to support you when you're right. I promise to be your partner, not your project. And I promise to love you, not because you saved me, but because you showed me how to save myself. Adrian's eyes were bright. The vicar pronounced them married, and Adrian kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. The chapel erupted in applause. Whoa. The reception was held at Ashford House, in the garden where Eliza had spent so many hours these past months. Tables were set up under lanterns, food and wine flowing freely. It was nothing like the elaborate affair her mother had originally planned, and it was perfect. Lady Pemberton cornered Eliza during dinner. "You know what they're calling you?" "I'm afraid to ask." "The woman who fought back. Some of the younger ladies are using you as inspiration. I heard 3 engagements were called off this month because the brides decided they deserved better." Eliza didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I didn't mean to start a movement. The best movements are never planned. They just happen when one person is brave enough to go first." Lady Pemberton raised her glass. "To Eliza Ashford, the woman who changed the rules." Others joined in the toast. Eliza felt overwhelmed, humbled, and slightly terrified of what she'd become to these people. Adrian found her later, pulling her away from the crowd to a quiet corner of the garden. "Regretting it yet?" he asked. "Marrying you? Never. Becoming a symbol? Slightly." Adrian laughed. "You don't have to be a symbol if you don't want to be. I think it's too late for that." "Then we'll figure it out. Together." Eliza leaned into him. "I love you. I love you too." They stood there in the fading light, the sounds of the party distant and dreamlike. Eliza thought about the woman she'd been 2 months ago, scared, obedient, willing to marry a man she barely knew just because it was expected. That woman felt like a stranger now. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked. "That I almost lost all of this. If you hadn't stopped the wedding, but you would have figured it out eventually. You're too smart not to." "Maybe. Or maybe I would have convinced myself it was fine, that being miserable was just part of being married." Adrian's arms tightened around her. "I'm glad we'll never have to find out." The party went late into the night. People danced, laughed, drank too much wine. Eliza's parents stayed until the end, her father actually smiling for the first time in months. When the last guest finally left, Eliza and Adrian stood in the empty garden, surrounded by discarded glasses and wilting flowers. "That went well," Eliza said. "Better than your first attempt at this." She laughed. "Significantly better." Adrian pulled her close. "Come on, let's go to bed." "Are you propositioning me, Your Grace?" "We're married. I'm allowed to proposition you." "Fair point." They walked inside together, hand in hand. As they climbed the stairs, Eliza felt a sense of peace settle over her. This was real. This was hers. Not because someone arranged it or expected it, but because she chose it. In Adrian's room, their room now, he helped her out of the blue dress, his hands gentle and sure. When they finally came together, it was nothing like Eliza had been told to expect. There was no pain, no awkwardness, just warmth and closeness, and the feeling of being completely, utterly known. Afterward, lying in Adrian's arms with the moonlight streaming through the windows, Eliza felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Safe. "What are you smiling about?" Adrian asked, his fingers trailing patterns on her shoulder. "Everything. Nothing. I don't know. I'm just happy." Adrian kissed her forehead. "Good. You deserve to be." Eliza turned to look at him. "So do you." His expression grew serious. "I spent so long being angry, being bitter, hunting down men who reminded me of the one who destroyed Charlotte. And then you walked into my life. Well, I walked into yours. And suddenly I had something worth fighting for instead of just fighting against." "You saved me," Eliza said. "No, I gave you information. You saved yourself." Eliza smiled. "Then we saved each other." "I can live with that." They fell asleep tangled together, the first night of what Eliza hoped would be thousands. The weeks that followed were an adjustment, learning to live with someone, to share space and decisions and a life. It wasn't always easy. Adrian had habits Eliza found infuriating, like leaving books open on every surface. Eliza had a tendency to rearrange his study that drove Adrian mad. But they learned. They compromised. They fought occasionally, sharp, passionate arguments that ended with apologies and sometimes spectacular makeup sessions. And slowly, Adrian started letting go of his vendetta. He didn't stop entirely. There were still men who needed exposing, still frauds who needed stopping. But he was more selective now, more careful. And he let Reed handle most of it, stepping back into an advisory role rather than being on the front lines. "I have better things to do with my time," he told Eliza one morning over breakfast. "Like what?" "Like this." He gestured at the table, at the quiet domestic scene. "Like being married to you." Eliza felt warmth bloom in her chest. "That's very sentimental of you. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation." 3 months after the wedding, Eliza received a letter from one of the young women she'd met at Lady Pemberton's dinner party. The woman had called off her engagement after learning her fiancé was abusive, and she'd done it publicly, using Eliza's example as her guide. "Thank you," the letter said, "for showing me I didn't have to accept a life I didn't want. You changed everything for me." Eliza showed the letter to Adrian, her hands shaking slightly. "You did that," he said. "We did that. You started it by stopping my wedding. And you finished it by refusing to be silent." Eliza folded the letter carefully. "Do you think Charlotte would be proud?" Adrian's expression softened. "I think she'd love you." 6 months into their marriage, Eliza realized she was pregnant. She told Adrian over dinner, terrified of his reaction. They'd never talked about children, never discussed whether they wanted them. Adrian stared at her. "You're sure?" "The doctor confirmed it yesterday." For a long moment, Adrian didn't move. Then he stood, crossed to her side of the table, and pulled her into his arms. "Are you happy?" Eliza asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "Terrified," Adrian admitted. "But yes, happy." Eliza pulled back to look at him. "You'll be a good father." "I have no idea how to be a father." "Neither did mine, and he figured it out. Eventually." Adrian laughed, shaky but genuine. "Then I suppose we'll figure it out together." The pregnancy was announced to much fanfare. Eliza's mother immediately began planning, buying tiny clothes and blankets. Her father became oddly emotional, tearing up at random moments. And society, which had spent months gossiping about Eliza's scandalous marriage, shifted their narrative. Now she wasn't just the woman who fought back. She was the Duchess of Ashford, expecting an heir, living proof that you could defy expectations and still build something beautiful. The baby, a girl, was born on a cold January morning. Eliza labored for 14 hours, Adrian refusing to leave her side despite the doctor's protests that it wasn't proper for husbands to be present. "Propriety can go to hell," Adrian had said, holding Eliza's hand through every contraction. When their daughter finally arrived, screaming and red-faced and perfect, Adrian cried. Actual tears streaming down his face as he held the tiny bundle. "What should we name her?" Eliza asked, exhausted and elated. Adrian looked at her, then at the baby. "Charlotte." Eliza's eyes filled. "Are you sure?" "She'd want to be part of this, part of what we built." They named her Charlotte Eliza Blackwood, and when they introduced her to the family, even Eliza's father cried. 2 years later, Eliza stood in the garden at Ashford House, watching Adrian chase their daughter around the fountain. Charlotte, who everyone called Lottie, was squealing with delight, her dark curls bouncing as she ran. "Got you!" Adrian scooped her up, spinning her until she shrieked with laughter. Eliza's mother appeared beside Eliza, smiling at the scene. "You've built a good life." "We have." "I'm proud of you. I should have said that sooner, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of the woman you've become." Eliza squeezed her mother's hand. "Thank you." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching Adrian and Lottie play. In the distance, Eliza could hear the sounds of London, carriages, voices, the constant hum of the city. But here, in this garden, it felt like a different world. A world she'd fought for, a world she'd claimed. Adrian caught her eye across the garden and smiled. Lottie waved, shouting, "Mama, come play!" Eliza walked over, letting Adrian pull her into the game. They chased Lottie around the fountain, collapsing in a laughing heap on the grass when she finally tired herself out. Lying there with her husband on one side and her daughter on the other, Eliza thought about the woman she'd been, the one who'd stood at the altar, abandoned and humiliated, certain her life was over. That woman had been wrong. Her life hadn't ended that day. It had begun. And looking at Adrian, at Lottie, at the home they'd built together, Eliza knew she'd make the same choices all over again. Every fight, every scandal, every terrifying moment, it had led her here. To a life she chose, to a love she fought for, to a future she built with her own hands. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked, his hand finding hers in the grass. Eliza smiled. "That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Adrian brought her hand to his lips. "So am I." Lottie squirmed between them. "Story, Papa!" Adrian laughed. "What kind of story?" "Princess story." "All right, once upon a time there was a princess who refused to be rescued. She rescued herself instead. And she lived happily ever after," Lottie finished, clapping her hands. Adrian glanced at Eliza, his eyes soft. "Exactly right." Eliza leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the clouds drift across the sky. Happily ever after wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And real, Eliza had learned, was so much better than perfect. Years later, when Lottie was old enough to ask questions, Eliza told her the whole story. About Thomas, about the wedding, about the fight that followed. She didn't sugarcoat it. She didn't make it neat or simple. "Did it hurt?" Lottie asked, "when everyone said mean things?" "Yes," Eliza said honestly. "It hurt a lot." "Then why did you do it?" "Because staying silent would have hurt more. And because I wanted to be someone you could be proud of." Lottie thought about this. "I am proud of you, Mama." Eliza's throat tightened. "Good. And when you're older, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to choose between what's easy and what's right, I hope you choose right, even if it's scary." "Did you choose right?" Eliza looked across the room to where Adrian was reading, Lottie's baby brother asleep on his chest. She looked at the life they'd built, the family they'd created, the respect they'd earned. "Yes," she said. "I did." And she had. Every choice, every risk, every moment of courage, it had brought her here, to this exact moment, this exact life, a life she'd claimed, a future she'd written herself, and that, Eliza thought, was worth everything.